This is episode number 107 of the Guns Magazine podcast. Hi there, and welcome to the Guns Magazine podcast. I'm your host and the editor of Guns Magazine, Brent Wheat. Thanks for joining us as we talk to the interesting folks who make up the world of shooting, hunting, and the firearms industry. First, before we get started, let's take a second to talk about our pair of great sponsors. The presenting sponsor of the Guns Magazine podcast is Hodgdon. Hodgdon's family of 777 powders, available in granular powder and pellets, gives muzzleloading enthusiasts a quick cleaning, low odor black powder substitute for rifle and pistol applications. To learn more about 777 powder, visit hodgdon.com. Our supporting sponsor is IMR Powder. IMR strives to bring new and legendary powders to reloaders in a never-ending process of innovation. Whether you're reloading for your rifle, pistol, shotgun, or muzzleloader, IMR has a powder to fit your needs. Learn more about this great portfolio of powders at imrpowder.com. Well, today, American Handgunner editor Tom McHale and I are going to talk about the parade of lies surrounding the Kyle Rittenhouse trial. This episode was recorded during the jury deliberations, so we don't know how it's going to ultimately end up, but we're going to talk about Rittenhouse, the people he shot, and perhaps biggest of all in the story, the partisan mass media. Tom and I are going to chat about how a tragedy involving several people who probably should have used better judgment has been turned into a simplistic morality play of Shakespearean proportions by people on both ends of the spectrum. Now here's our discussion of the Kyle Rittenhouse trial. Calling Tom McHale, this is the Guns Magazine podcast, trying to reach you in your bunker.
You know, it's funny. I actually am in my bunker.
You are? I'm so jealous.
I am in the lower level in a concrete block room full of reloading gear.
And depending on how things go regarding our topic of the day, I may be really jealous you have your own bunker, but having said that, I don't think so. And of course, I'm referring to the most important and historic trial in the history of mankind, the Kyle Rittenhouse trial. And let me set the stage as we record this. They are deliberating, so we don't know what's going to happen. They could declare a mistrial. They could reach a hung jury. A lot of weird stuff could happen. But I think there's a pretty good chance that they're going to get a verdict. And I think what we want to do here today is kind of talk about our observations, not knowing the outcome. And of course, we've always got opinions, and Tom's got an opinion or two. But since
whoa. We do know the outcome.
Yeah.
We have been told the outcome ever since the event happened.
This is true.
Do you not watch the mainstream news?
No, I don't. I really don't.
It has been very clear since day one. Heck, even Twitter knows the outcome.
Exactly. Well, for those that have been living under a rock and not, following this most important trial in the history of mankind, at least this week, Mr. Kyle Rittenhouse, a then 17-year-old, went to Kenosha, Wisconsin to defend truth, justice, and the American way from looters who were tearing the city apart after the police department shot a black man. And for various and sundry reasons that people say it was either a good police action shooting or it was a trigger-happy racist cop trying to kill somebody, everybody got out in the street and started tearing stuff up. And Mr. Rittenhouse, who was there armed with an AR-15 and a first aid kit, he ended up killing 2 people and shooting and seriously injuring a third. He's now on trial in Kenosha, and as I said, as we speak, they are deliberating on his fate. He was charged with 2 counts of murder and a whole bunch of other things, including some weapons charges. So, since this is a black rifle Second Amendment type case, I thought this might be time to take our bully pulpit and kind of discuss this. So, Tom, what is your takeaway on the overall situation? Let's take the media out of it and the public opinion and all that mess. But at the heart of it, what is this about?
Okay. At the very highest level, I think we have to address the elephant in the room, and this is something gun owners, concealed carriers, lawfully armed citizens really need to think about. None of this needed to happen.
Exactly.
And what I mean by that is when you choose to become society's protector, you need to be very prepared to deal with the consequences. You can be right. You can be right all day long, and you can lose everything. Mm-hmm. And if you don't believe me, just ask Kyle Rittenhouse. We don't know what's going to happen at this point, but I would bet he's going to be acquitted of the murder charges. When you really look at a lot of details, it appears to be legitimate self-defense. Now, with that said, I wouldn't have been within 100 miles of that scene. I just wouldn't. It's not worth it to me.
Yeah.
If that scene was happening outside my house, different story. But I'm not going there.
Yeah. And so that at the crux of what's going on here. But now in our country, where even, a discussion of sunrise can polarize people into two violent factions into a near riot. Of course, this turned into a giant falderah. And let me say straight out of the gate, I don't think anybody's right here nor completely wrong, but the way our friends in the mass media and social media, et cetera, have portrayed this thing, it's borderline criminally insane. And Tom and I were talking before we got started. We've been doing our research on this, and Kyle Rittenhouse is either the savior for all that is good and holy in the world, or he is Satan reincarnate and worships, at black mass and Adolf Hitler. And if you actually get past that kind of garbage, which responsible members of the media should not be portraying, it's a lot more complicated than that. And we're going to try to pull out some of those threads and, maybe offer a little more sane and realistic version of what things are.
Yeah, you bring up an interesting point. I would actually take it further regarding the media. I think the media is criminally liable.
Yeah.
In this whole, none of this had to happen. I mean, from the moment the mainstream media started reporting the Jacob Blake incident, police shoot unarmed black man. Mm-hmm. From the very first instant, the entire world knew felony warrant. Police had tried to arrest him and tased him multiple times. He fought. He grabbed a knife. He got in a car that wasn't his and tried to escape with children in the car. And the report is police shoot unarmed black man. And they knew this. They knew he was armed. They knew he was fighting with a knife. Come on. So, and it just goes on from there into the Rittenhouse, scenario once all the rioting started.
And this was right after George Floyd, and all they were doing, and I'm including all of the mainstream media, they were pandering. They were going for clicks. Mm-hmm. They were clickbaiting, and they don't care, apparently, that this inflamed tensions that exist within our country, all they wanted was to get people riled up and clicking on that story, and it worked. And it brought a bunch of people out that you can say they were asserting their right to gather peacefully, but I'm sorry, you will never convince me that gathering and destroying things is a legitimate way to express displeasure with another group. Mm-hmm. And it's funny, I think most of our progressive friends would say, well, but unless now we're talking, what if a bunch of right-wing folks, well, let's use an example, the Capitol Hill thing. That was just wrong in 72 different ways, according to our progressive friends. But I guarantee you, if progressives had been the one that had done that, they would be defending them to the hilt. So the great hypocrisy among our media and commentators and our society in general is very much at play here. But let's get back to this particular instance. Is a bunch of people came together, and frankly, I don't think most of them were really there for altruistic reasons. Do you think?
No. I mean, what stunned me is, started digging into this story and I watched a whole lot of video from that event, from drones, from cell phones, from FBI had an airplane, I guess, up 8,000 feet above all this stuff.
Yeah.
What stunned me were the number of people, hundreds and hundreds of people milling around this area. And then when you get to the cell phone videos, how many people were armed? Handguns, rifles, shotguns, chains, bats. I mean, the list just goes on and on and on. And they were people on all sides.
Exactly.
Were riled up, ticked off, ready to fight.
Yep.
And there was near continuous verbal confrontation, going on from minute one in this thing.
Yep.
And it's unfortunate.
Well, you put that many inflamed people in an area with weapons, what'd you think was going to happen? And that goes back to the first bad decision here was by Mr. Rittenhouse. He had no dog in this fight, so to speak. So what did he do? He grabbed a rifle. Actually, he drove. A friend gave him a rifle, and he inserted himself in the middle of this. So I tend to support his version of events based on what I've seen, but I don't think he's the real American patriot and honor student and choir boy that unfortunately some of the right-wing media are portraying him to be.
Yeah, I have trouble using the word hero in that context. I just do, I think he made he's 17, he made a very bad call. I would suspect he realizes that now. Yeah. If he had decided to stay home, or if he really wanted to help, show up during daylight hours and scrub graffiti then.
Yeah, with a scrub brush. How about that?
Be gone by the time the chaos started.
Yep.
Great. I might look at him as a civic hero in that light, but showing up with a gun to an angry riot is just asking for trouble.
Yeah, and I know we've received some, listeners, readers that say, well, he's got a right to do that, and he's just trying to stand up for. Okay, yes, you're correct on that, but again, going back to what Tom said. To what end? Is that really helping you, your family, your community? Or are you just trying to get yourself in the middle of something, and in the back of your mind, you're hoping you're getting in a big gunfight where you can be a hero? And for anybody that's been around actual real gunfights and real bloodshed, it's not something you ever want to be in the middle of. If you are, you've got mental problems.
Well, what was interesting is, watching all the videos in this thing, it sounded like a war zone. Yeah. I mean, you think about this case and you think, a few gunshots, I think he shot at 4 people, hitting 3 of them. But there was several minutes, before, during, and after this incident of just near continuous gunfire around the whole area, Yep. People shooting them in the air, missing. I don't know. There's no way to know what was going on, but there was near continuous gunfire. Just absolutely insane.
Well, we've been pretty hard on Mr. Rittenhouse, and I think deservedly so. But now let's talk about the other people. And the one I'm looking at right now on my computer screen is Gage Grosskreutz. I hope I'm saying that correctly. He's the gentleman that got shot and survived. And I this has not been reported very widely, but I'm looking at a Chicago Sun-Times article about him. He apparently on the stand estimated he's been to 75 riots prior to Kenosha as a volunteer, I'll use this in quotes, a volunteer medic who armed himself with a handgun. Mm-hmm. Really? I can't imagine 75 events of any kind I've been to in the last 10 years. So this guy, to me, looks like he's a professional riot attendee. I don't know beyond that, but apparently he attends riots pretty regularly. Now, what kind of person does that?
He's an interesting case because he's a media poster child too. Just this week, I don't recall if it was day 5 or 6 of the testimony, but he was on the stand and he testified very clearly to the prosecution's chagrin that Rittenhouse was armed. When Gage put up his hands and said, "Whoa, don't shoot," he didn't, lowered his gun. And then when Gage pointed his pistol at Kyle's head, that's when he got shot. Right.
Yep.
But you looked at the actual media headlines on CBS and NBC this week were of that testimony where Rittenhouse's victim says he feared for his life. He was scared he was going to die, scared he was going to get shot. Didn't say anything about what happened. That, he feared for his life when he aimed a pistol at somebody's head and then got shot after that. Right.
Yeah.
It's kind of changes everything.
Well, it was one of those, he thought that Rittenhouse was an active shooter. So it was his job to defend, all that is good and holy and right in the world and come forward and, take down Rittenhouse. Well, looking at the tactical aspect of it, if you see somebody who is shooting people and you think they're a bad guy, why wouldn't you go to a position and take him down? Why would you advance on him unless that was the only thing possible? I think he wanted to scrap with him, not thinking that maybe this guy's not going to shoot at him, because there's a lot of other folks, and apparently in these other demonstrations, they're carrying guns and nobody really shoots anybody. Otherwise, it makes national media. All the normal constraints were off here. And if you've seen some of the video after he got shot, he's really shocked that he got shot, which, makes sense, right? But how could he not? I mean, how could he not be amazed that you charge a guy with a rifle that you've already seen shoot two people, you point your gun at him and you get shot? That seems like a pretty predictable consequence there, maybe?
Well, yeah. I mean, you see clear video of him running down the street chasing Rittenhouse while drawing a gun out of the backside of his, belt. He had a handgun stash back there. The sequence of events is kind of fascinating. The first guy was a Rosenbaum, I think he was, that was started this whole thing. He actually was chasing Kyle Rittenhouse for like a block and a half.
Yep.
And caught up to him in front of a car, looked like outside of a convenience store or something. And that's where the first, shots took place. I guess he literally grabbed the barrel of the rifle.
Yeah.
And then Rittenhouse shot him. And then he starts, Rittenhouse starts running away towards the police, and this entire mob is following him. And that's when the subsequent two things happened. He gets kicked in the head. Somebody threw a concrete block at his head.
One of the victims, hit him with the skateboard.
Hit him with a skateboard, and then Gage, showed up with his pistol and got shot too. It was just fascinating, the chain of events. The one thing, the bad words just set off this sequence of events, and by then it was just too late. People were going down.
Well, I kind of liken this to when I was a working cop. We have an interstate running through our jurisdiction, and sometimes on afternoon shift, it would become almost a daily humorous occurrence where you get first a 911 call. There's a guy crazy and he's trying to cut me off, and I'm afraid he's going to hurt me and blah, blah, blah. Well, then immediately you get another call from the same look. There's some guy in a car and he's cutting me off. It was both sides of the road rage incident. And they're calling the police, claiming to be the victim. They didn't do anything at all. And yet they're engaged in this mano-a-mano duel at 75 miles an hour through rush hour traffic. And they don't seem to understand, if you'd take your foot off the gas, maybe pull back safely, maybe get off the road, you've removed the match from the kerosene. But we don't want to do that, right? Death before dishonor. And that's not just a slogan. People have discovered that too late, to their chagrin.
Yep. Absolutely.
So I'm not calling anybody a knucklehead, but when you get a bunch of knuckleheads together and bad things happen, I think most of the rest of us in the world go, couldn't see that one coming, could you? So, well, now let's move on to the trial, which has been very, very interesting. I will say, and I'm trying to scroll through here, the judge's name. I've been very impressed with the judge. He's got to be under incredible pressure to get the verdict that, quote unquote, they want. And he is, from, again, media reports, it looks to me like he's doing a great job of basically holding the attorneys on both sides to the rules. And I got to say, the assistant district attorney up there has really pushed the line a couple of times, including where he starts talking about how guilty Rittenhouse looks because he asserted his right to remain silent. And the judge got furious about that because he said, basically, our Fifth Amendment, that you don't have to incriminate yourself. That's like pretty much a basic, part of every criminal proceeding. And here he was basically making fun of the defendant. And in my experience of having sat through countless trials, any attorney anywhere, the most local court to the Supreme Court, is going to get admonished, and every attorney knows that. So that tells me he was playing some theater there, and kudos to the judge for not letting it happen.
Well, I think they're desperate. The prosecution is absolutely desperate. They absolutely, positively have to get a conviction, or all hell is going to break loose in that town, right?
Yep.
And they're just going to outrageous lengths to force the the direction of the trial to fit the narrative that doesn't exist.
Exactly. I got to say the defining moment of this trial has to be when, and they've not identified who it was, but one of the people at the prosecution table did a face palm when Grossenkreutz, said, I pointed my gun at him and then he shot me. Well, you just kind of set up the defense for self-defense,
Well, it was worse than that. It was a double whammy. He said, "Yeah, no, he didn't shoot me when I had my hands up.
Right,
it was fine. Didn't shoot me at all. He was, he even lowered his gun, and then, strangely, when I pointed my gun at him and said I'm going to kill you or whatever it was, that's when he shot me. Imagine that."
Well, we'll do a quick little primer on the law, and let me say a caveat by it varies in every jurisdiction, mostly state by state, and then you have federal law over the top of it. But in most places, murder means you went into a situation intending to kill somebody. And that's a pretty high level of proof that, that you, Tom, went to Joe's house and intended to kill him, and you did so, therefore you committed murder. Manslaughter in, again, most jurisdictions means that you did something so wildly unsafe that any rational human being would realize could result in serious bodily injury or death. So you've got those two main types of crimes for killing people. And manslaughter doesn't involve intent. With murder, you have to intend to kill somebody or at least cause them great harm. With manslaughter, you're just doing something so stupid, so reckless, that it results, and when it results in the death, then you can be charged with that. So the flip side of this is self-defense, and it's common law in pretty much every jurisdiction, except maybe a few of our places in California, where if you're facing with imminent bodily harm or death, you can defend yourself up to and including deadly force. And that's what Rittenhouse's team is standing on. And based upon what I've read and my experience, I think he's got a real good chance of walking away from the murder charges.
I do too. I think the only one that's has less than perfect clarity is the first one. We don't really know as well what exactly happened back there. We know Rosenbaum was chasing him. Mm-hmm. We know Rosenbaum had told him just prior to that, told Rittenhouse that if I get you alone tonight, I'm going to kill you.
Yeah.
So you combine that with Rosenbaum chasing him. He catches up to him in front of this car. There's no good video on that. It's distant and far, and you hear the shots, and Rosenbaum's down, right? So, hopefully the jury has heard a lot more detail than the rest of us on what exactly happened there. We do know from forensic evidence that Rosenbaum had his hand on the barrel of the rifle.
Yeah.
So, the testimony is that he lunged for the gun. He's trying to take the rifles. So Rittenhouse fired. Sounds pretty clear cut. Everything after that point, I think, is very clear self-defense. He's on the ground, he's getting beat, he's got guns in his face, he's literally on his back in the pavement, and people are attacking him. Yeah. So that's going to be a tough uphill battle to call some sort of premeditated murder.
Exactly.
On those scenarios, right?
If anybody was trying to kill anybody, it would sound like members of the crowd were. Mm-hmm. I'm sure they weren't standing there going, "Sir, you're down. Can we help you back up?" I'm sure they were saying things like, "I hope you die. We're going to kill you. We're going to beat you to a bloody pulp." That again shows premeditation, that a few of those folks wanted to kill him. So he was in fear and he used lethal force. So I think there's a very good chance, if the jury does what I think they will do, they will find him not guilty. Now, he's also got a weapons charge. He was 17 years old at that point. He did not procure the weapon. A friend gave it to him. So he did not transport it across state lines, which would have been a federal crime. And it's against Wisconsin law to possess a firearm when you're under 18. I'm not sure of the exact legalities there, but whatever he was doing, he was holding a gun that he shouldn't have been under state law in possession of. I think they will probably find him guilty on that one. And I'm guessing it probably carries a couple of years as a potential sentence. And in most cases, typically across the country, for a first-time defendant, they would give him probation, time served, maybe a brief prison sentence. But I think in this case, if that's the only charge they can hang on him, he'll get the max, which you can argue, is that legit or not? Which liberals say, absolutely, he killed people. And others are saying he's an American hero. He shouldn't serve any time.
There's an interesting thing. I think you and I probably discussed it a little bit here and there, is we gave him a real rough time at the beginning of this show about being there in the first place and showing up with a rifle and inserting himself in a volatile situation. That is, I think, supremely dumb. I think it's bad judgment. I think he made the biggest mistake of his life by doing that. But it's not illegal, and there is no criminal consequence to that under the law, right? And I think what's interesting is he's really being tried in the court of public opinion for that decision more than anything else, in my view. But again, that's not against the law to make a bad decision.
Exactly. And several commentators have made that point. So let's move on to the media side of things. And it is just stunning looking at the variety of opinions people are expressing. For example, Ayanna Pressley, who is Democrat from Massachusetts, a U.S. representative, she tweeted and said he's a white supremacist domestic terrorist. Well, that's pretty strong language considering none of that has been proven at all. And it goes down from there. All kinds of left-leaning pundits have, CBS deleted a tweet where they said Rittenhouse murdered 2 men. Well, that was when he first got charged. He was not a convicted murderer. And I would defy you to find another tweet on any other case where they would convict people before they've gone to court. And it even Joe Biden, when he was a candidate, said he was a white supremacist. So there's very little evidence he was had any kind of connection with the white supremacy movement.
I've always wondered how is it that you're branded a white supremacist when you kill 2 white people and shoot a third white person?
There's that.
The new math is admittedly beyond my comprehension. I don't get all the new social rules, but that one, I have to admit, that one stumps me. So.
Yeah. Well, I'm just, as a longtime member of the media, I've written for newspapers. I've appeared in every kind of, media, and I've in my former life, I was the spokesman for the department. So I've worked with everybody from the national morning news to, our local newspaper. And it inflames me to no end to see the reckless and irresponsible language that otherwise intelligent people should be using. And I got to say, we always think our side is right and the other's wrong, but it's generally the progressive side of the house that is using this inflammatory language that, frankly, I don't know how they get away with what I think is libelous, but they do. And I don't understand. I just don't understand.
Whatever happens with this thing, I would love to see some significant legal action against key members of the media in this whole scenario, going all the way back to Jacob Blake.
Yeah.
I mean, I would love to see business owners file suit against certain elements of the media for misrepresenting the situation. Now, would a riot have happened anyway? I don't know. Maybe. Is it far more likely to happen when a complete misrepresentation and literal fabrication of actual facts on these incidents are put forth I mean, the media wields enormous power, and they are actually largely responsible for deaths, in these types of situations.
Yep.
And certainly lots of property destruction. When do the consequences come?
Yep. So then I guess we've stripped away all these layers, and that leaves us, you and I, and our listeners and our friends and our acquaintances on social media and people we don't know. What does this say about us? Because I'm seeing all these hyper partisan people saying, this is the trial of the century and this defines America today. And, the Chicago Police Department has canceled all days off for officers last weekend in anticipation of riots, depending on the verdict. Where have we gotten, to this point where a case that arguably has nothing to do with any of these big questions, which are legit questions, it's a bunch of people that got together and made a whole series of bad decisions on both sides, and people died. But why do we all have to be fighting with each other over this?
Yeah, it's why are we defined?
Yeah,
why are we defined by this?
Yeah.
Facts don't matter. It's we've got our preconceived notions, whatever they are, and we're going to die with them. So there you have it. Right.
So, Tom, I kind of stated my pregame betting line, I guess. So what do you think?
In terms of the outcome of the trial?
Yeah.
I'm loath to do this, meaning agree with you just on general principle.
Of course.
But seriously, I'm with you on this. If I had to bet a ham sandwich on the outcome, I think the weapons charges are going to stick. I think he's going to get an obscene maximum, whatever is possible on that sentence, as some kind of rationalization or justification of to satisfy the mob and say, yes, he's a terrible guy.
Yeah.
Sorry, we couldn't get the murder charges, but boy, we really stuck it to him with the weapons charges, know? And I think a rational jury will have a great deal of difficulty convicting him of murder. When you really look at the details of what happened, that's a tough hill to climb.
Yeah. And what do you think, how is the media going to portray this if he's found not guilty on murder?
Domestic terrorist, they already are. So, they're all about victimhood here. So
yeah,
I think they're going to fan the flames of more rioting. That's great news for them to cover. The more buildings set on fire, the better from their perspective. So, and that's a horrible thing to say, but I believe it these days.
Exactly. So making the full circle here, what would our advice be to folks that are thinking, I need to be part of that?
Stay home. I can't tell you how many discussions I have online with people that take us to task for saying, if it's not your fight, stay out of it.
Yeah.
It's like, no, how could you let that innocent person be injured or whatever? You don't know. You don't know what's going on. If you're going to be a protector, let's start with who you should protect, and that is you and your family.
Exactly.
Right? If you insert yourself into situations like this, you have failed in that task. Things probably will not end well for you. You'll probably lose everything you've ever made on legal fees. You may end up in jail for the rest of your life or dead. How are you doing protecting your family then? Was it worth it?
Yep. Well, not a pleasant, uplifting topic. We normally try to laugh a little bit, but I guess in the end, my hope is this is not a defining moment in our country as many in the media are trying to portray it to be. I don't think it is. I think it's a microcosm of not about racial justice or injustice or any of that. It's about people inserting themselves violently and dangerously into a situation they didn't have to be part of. And that is the true tragedy here, and the more we reinforce that idea or meme or whatever, the worse our society's going to become. So I hope that cooler heads will prevail. And if people have a problem with the verdict, the charges, racial justice or whatever, work in some kind of positive, proactive means to get your point across. But grabbing a gun and going to 75 protests just because you want to help, doesn't seem like a good use of a life to me. So, long pause there.
I wasn't sure where you were going.
Yeah. Well, hey, at least we'll laugh here at the end, Yeah. So, I don't know, but like I said, they're currently deliberating, and hopefully, I really do. I hope when this podcast is published that everybody's like, oh, that deal a couple days ago? Yeah, no big deal. Nobody got their hair on fire or their panties in a wad, and we move on to the next crisis of the moment. But I guess we'll see.
A week, we'll have another, I'm sure.
Oh, exactly. And remember, a tried and true media tradition is if it bleeds, it leads. And maybe more of us need to turn the news off a little bit more often.
I think that's an excellent suggestion. And it makes me happy that I tend to think we're more entertainers and certainly not journalists, because that's a pretty sad profession these days.
It is. Let's just say the facts we report, we try to be accurate in. So we just don't report a lot of facts.
There you go.
So, well, Tom, hopefully this is a moot point, null and void afterwards, and we don't have to talk about it again. But I appreciate you taking the time, and we'll see what the world brings next week, next month, next year, and probably talk some more.
My pleasure. Good talking with you.
Well, as I said in the beginning of this, we don't know how the trial's going to end, but I'm sure regardless of the outcome, it's only going to spark further division and more stupid actions by otherwise intelligent people. Ending on that sobering note, I hope you're enjoying the Guns Magazine podcast. Guns Magazine was first on the newsstand, and today we're bringing you the most interesting chats in the gun world. If you've got any questions or comments about the show, please email me. That's editor@gunsmagazine.com. Make sure you subscribe to us on your favorite podcast directory, YouTube, and of course at gunsmagazine.com. And while you're online, don't forget to check out our great sister publications, American Handgunner Magazine at AmericanHandgunner.com, AmericanCop.com, and our numerous special editions available on our websites. Most of all, while you're online, I'd also appreciate it if you would share a favorite episode or some kind words on your own social media. And finally, don't forget to check out the presenting sponsor of the Guns Magazine podcast, Hodgdon Powder, along with our supporting sponsor, IMR Powder. See their complete lineup of great powders at Hodgdon.com or IMRpowder.com. Well, that's it for this episode of the Guns Magazine podcast. For the entire staff at FMG Publications, I'm Guns Magazine editor Brent Wheat. Now get out there and get shooting.